Our theme this year is a new climate for business, and in many ways, you've been shaping the new climate for our food system. So with both Honest Tea and Beyond Meat, you've tried to redefine food, one of the most basic human elements, but in very different ways. So what does it mean to redefine food?
Yeah, well first, let me just say how wonderful it is to be here. I was recalling with Aaron that it was back in 1995 that I first got connected to BSR, so to sort of come full circle and be in this community is just really gratifying and nice to be here. The first thing to recognize is that our food system, for really decades, just wasn't working for the consumer. What happened was big companies made food that they wanted to make, and consumers really didn't have much choice and much control and much say in what was made. So big companies made food, sold it through a limited number of channels, marketed it through a limited number of channels, and consumers were the receivers. Today, the power structure has totally changed. Consumers now say, hey, I want this, I want that, and they can communicate with each other in ways that they couldn't before, and they can buy it in so many different channels than they could before. And so the consumer is now driving what is sold to them, and so that leads to different outcomes for food. Instead of focusing on scale and cheapness, the consumer says, you know, I want something that's where I can understand exactly how it was made, who made it, what happened to the people involved in the supply chain. And so that leads to something that I've called the undoing of food. And Honest Tea is a good example of that, really a stripped down, every ingredient you can understand, and if you go online can sort of see where it was sourced, understand every aspect of the product. The other trend that's happening is embodied by a company like Beyond Meat, which is about a redoing of food. And so a consumer says, I have concerns, either health concerns, environmental concerns, concerns about what happens to animals. And so then an entrepreneur, like what we've done at Beyond Meat, says, let's recreate a product. Let's leave out some of the things that consumers have rejected, whether it's health aspects or environmental aspects. And that leads to a redoing of food. And so there is, despite the fact that food companies have been around for a long time, there's this incredible level of innovation happening now and opportunity and positive impact for the consumer, for their health, but also for the environment. And it's long overdue, so it's an exciting time to be in food.
Absolutely. So one of the aspects that I've heard you describe that I just love is this idea of democratizing access. So this all sounds fantastic, but if it only reached a small number of people who could afford it, we're not achieving the objectives you're trying to achieve.
Right.
And that's meant that you've, what critics would say is you've gone to bed with big food, right? You've gotten some criticism on that. How do you respond?
So yeah, first of all, the goal with Honest Tea and with Beyond Meat was never just to sell healthy food to healthy people. And look, I love healthy people. I wish everybody was healthy. But that's obviously not the case. In fact, the United States is one of the least healthy countries in the world. When you look at average life expectancy, the UN ranks it every few years. And in 2017, Japan had the highest life expectancy. Italy second. You had to go all the way to number 33 to see that where the United States ranked, even though we're the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. So,
and we're going backwards.
Yeah, it's shameful. And so we have to find ways to make healthier products more accessible. And one of the reasons we partnered with Coca-Cola was because we love being the best-selling tea in the natural foods channel, but why was that mutually exclusive with also democratizing healthy products? And so from our point of view, the benefit is when we can work with a large company is distribution, it's scale, and the best evidence of that is what we've done with McDonald's. So Honest Kids is the first organic product to be carried in McDonald's, and we went in there, we replaced an 80-calorie drink with a 35-calorie drink. We've sold over 200 million units of that in just the past year, so we've helped remove both Honest Tea, Coca-Cola, and McDonald's collectively have helped remove over 1 billion calories from the American diet just through that partnership. So that's impactful scale. There's a false dichotomy that you said when you work with a big company, it means you're against the small producer, and that I reject that. I think that they can coexist. So I love going to farmers markets, and I'll source local ingredients whenever it makes sense. But the fact is, there's no organic tea in the United States, period. There really isn't tea grown in the United States either. So we are in a global economy. There are certain places and geographies where it makes sense for certain products to be grown. I don't think you have to, being with big food doesn't mean you reject or I think put the small producer out of business.
Yeah, and what does democratizing access to Beyond Meat look like?
It's really exciting. So once again, if we are only selling, I love Whole Foods, I love the coasts, but we want to be available everywhere. So you'll see shortly, we've just launched a Beyond Breakfast sausage patty in 9,000 Dunkin' Donuts stores around the country. It's the largest launch of any plant-based protein. And Dunkin', and when we're in the Dunkin' menu, it's at the really in line with the price of their pork sausage patty. And so that's part of what...
It's not a premium.
No, it's not a premium. It's an accessible price point. When we sell our product, we don't just go to the niche freezer section where most vegan products are sold. Our product is merchandised in the meat section, adjacent to the analog we're competing against. And so that means we reach a much wider audience. And so that's where this starts to get really exciting. When it will be even more exciting is when we will have the ability to underprice animal-based meat. And we will, because just think about what we're doing with Beyond Meat. We're making a product using 99% less water, 93% less land, just less inputs. The only reason it's more expensive now is because we're in the third year of building this business. There's no technology that launches at that competitive price point, but we are confident that within 5 years, certain parts of our product line will be able to underprice its animal-based analog. And then it gets really exciting. We get to go to schools. We get to go to other just places where we're a competitive option. And the long-term view of this is that by the time, I'll say my grandchildren, because I don't want to date myself too much, but by the time my grandchildren will be growing up, they will find it hard to understand that plant-based protein wasn't a staple of our diet, that it was only sort of a niche. They will find it hard to understand that we relied for decades on a system of basically raising and killing animals as the staple of our diet.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you're excited. We all got to try Beyond Sausage over lunch, and
Yes.
It was delicious. I have not yet tried the Dunkin' sandwich.
It's great.
But why don't we see a quick video about it?
And I'll just set this up. So
Please.
This is fun because one of the things that's happened at Beyond Meat is we have attracted an amazing array of endorsers. And these aren't the usual suspects. So if I tell you I'm working with a company that sells products that could be called vegan, you sort of get a certain association in your mind. And this video we're about to show you we released it in conjunction with our launch with Dunkin'. And so I'll show the video.
Great.
We brought in the biggest Beyond Meat fan we know as our newest employee to help introduce our new Beyond Sausage sandwich.
You want that plant-based great taste?
Thank you.
You have a beautiful day, you hear me? Top of the morning.
Are you super drunk?
Fresh out the oven. What's happening? One for you, one for you. Employee of the month is at it again, y'all.
Introducing the great-tasting plant-based Beyond Sausage sandwich. Available nationwide, only at Dunkin'.
It's so we're having so much fun with this, and we're getting athletes that come to us and have incorporated Beyond Meat in their diet and want to be able to talk. Chris Paul just did this wonderful video where he's shooting baskets with his son, but he's really, and he talks about it, I want my son to understand they're important, it's important to do something with their life. And for him, this was a way to say, he believes in it, and so this is just a different level of a relationship than the typical, sponsor, advertiser, front person. So
I'm pretty sure if you made us guess who was going to be in that commercial, Snoop might have been the last possible
That's
guess.
it. That's what's so. And just on a side note, we did a launch at Carl's Jr. For the Beyond Burger, and Snoop came to we had a food truck event, and he made a much more little handheld video. And he was wearing a coat that looked like it was fur. It was actually faux fur. But there was this whole side conversation. Why is Snoop wearing fur? He's talking about plant-based. And it's just such a fun, disruptive conversation that people aren't used to.
So I think it gets to, first and foremost, you're just talking about taste, right? You're not trying to explain why people should buy those products. You're talking about taste.
If it doesn't taste great, you don't get in the store. You don't get the chance to have that conversation.
So is this a fad, right? We know consumers are fickle.
Yeah.
They don't really want to be lectured or made to feel guilted into having to buy your products. How do you?
So we'll never, no, our tone is absolutely not that. And we're never going to tell someone not to eat meat. We're just going to say we got something better. As consumers get more informed, and this is what's happening, so frankly, much more quickly than we had anticipated, consumers understand now that their decisions have an impact. And so the climate being the most discernible one, and I'm sure this has been a theme here this week, but people understand that when they make a choice, there's an impact to it. And so this is especially the center of the plate is the single biggest decision any person can make in terms of their environmental impact. So, you can drive a hybrid, you can recycle, you can turn the water off while you brush your teeth. Those are all, they're important, you should do them, but they're minuscule compared to what you put at the center of the plate. And so this is a powerful opportunity for people to make change and frankly to make a statement, to make a stand. And even in this political climate where people may feel frustrated or powerless, this is power everyone has every day. I don't want to say we are in a sense have become sort of a face of this movement and don't necessarily deserve all the credit for it, but it is happening so quickly. And for me, it's one of the most encouraging things I've seen happen in recent years.
Yeah. Well, this is a sustainability crowd, so it might be a little bit of a biased audience, but they're also, tasting great's not going to be enough for this crowd. So how do you actually demonstrate that the entire value chain of your product, right? So we understand that it's not just we're replacing animal meat. But how do you make sure that that whole value chain is more sustainable?
Yeah, it's critical that we quantify it because there are, as everyone can imagine, real entrenched interests that are going to have questioned it. So rather than guess, we worked with the University of Michigan to do a peer-reviewed life cycle analysis. And peer-reviewed really makes it the gold standard. It's not just us throwing out numbers. And they did look at the life cycle of a beef burger versus the Beyond Burger and did find that 99% less water, 93% less land, 90% fewer greenhouse gases created. And so it's not like, oh, we're 10% better, 20% better. It's a fundamentally different approach to how we deliver protein to people. And then we think about the global challenges, and we don't have to tell people about what's going on in terms, flooding in Venice, fires in the rainforest. These are all things connected to our human footprint, or as I call it, our food print. And so, the fact is that there's not enough Earths to feed 7 billion, let alone 10 billion people on the kind of protein diet we have here in the United States. And there's whole countries that could actually leapfrog. Just like you don't see telephone poles in Bangladesh, you could avoid seeing livestock farms in Bangladesh and go right to plant-based protein. Where this has been controversial in the past is if you say, well, they should be eating lentil salads and it's not our role to dictate what anybody should eat. But if you say, here's something that is as tasty, as affordable, as nutritious from all the dimensions, then my belief is that nobody has an innate need to kill animals to satisfy their diet. The reason we've killed animals thus far is because they taste great. And if you could, and this is what the question my son said to me back when he was 13, and this is what made me a vegetarian. He says, if we can meet our dietary needs without killing animals, why wouldn't we try to do that? And at the time, I went along with him at the time because I wanted to support him. But the answer in the back of my mind is because veggie burgers taste terrible. But now that they taste great, it's like, why wouldn't we move in this direction?
Yeah.
And as I said, it's happened so quickly. It's really exciting.
So you've got big ambitions to scale then, right?
Absolutely.
So we're replacing meat farms in Bangladesh.
Not just Bangladesh.
How do you maintain that sustainability commitment when you get to be that big and when you think about the distribution system that is going to require?
Well, here's what's amazing about it. If you, the crops we're using, so peas is our main feedstock right now. Peas are a nitrogen-fixing crop. A lot of farmers grow peas and then we'll just plow them back into the soil just because they're great for soil health. But once again, with much less land. So what we can actually start to think about is more reforestation, more sustainable crops versus growing crops, commodity crops.
Yeah.
And so we're not getting rid of farmland, but we are trying to find ways to make it more sustainable. And then, the meat industry, without any, as part of the food system, is the least sustainable. What we're doing, and literally when they're burning forests in the Amazon, it's to create cropland to feed cows. Sometimes, the U.S. imports grains for, like Uruguay grows organic grains that we bring to the U.S. to feed to cows. So there's
not an
just
efficient system.
No, it's incredibly inefficient. It is by far the biggest logjam in food. So the real question, I would reverse your question and say, we are at a place where we're not sustainable because of the meat industry we've created. We have a solution. And really, what's also neat, going back to Bangladesh, is we have the ability for Bangladesh to be able to feed its own population with crops grown on its own land. So I said we use peas, that's what we use in the United States, but let's say it's buckwheat or some other crop that grows indigenous into there. Our approach to this is to be plant agnostic, so that we're not relying on peas, it's just any plant that, and most plants have some form of protein, we can extract the protein.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you've talked about how quickly this has changed, right? And I know even you were, I think, surprised by how quickly it's grown. I think you said you've grown 2.5 times per year for the past.
Our earnings report we just released, the sales grew 250% over the previous year.
So why is that growing? Why are you growing so fast? What changed all of a sudden?
The big breakthrough really is that the product is a step change better. So as I said, my family's been vegetarian for 14 years now, and we were always satisfied with the decision from an ethical perspective, but we were dissatisfied from a culinary and taste perspective. I've joked before that veggie burgers were a conspiracy by the meat industry to discourage people from becoming vegetarian, because once you taste them, like, I just don't need to be a vegetarian that badly. And the facts hold that up. The percentage of the population that was vegan or vegetarian was about 5%, and it's over decades. There was churn. People did it, maybe in college they'll do it, they get out and they say, oh, someone's having burgers and they're hungry. So.
Right.
The breakthrough was that Beyond Meat said, all right, we're not going to make veggie burgers the way everyone else has. What everyone else was doing was basically taking plants and vegetables and mushing them together in the form of a disc and saying that is a substitute for a burger. And at Beyond Meat, we said, let's not define meat by its origin. Let's define it by its composition. And then you get a different answer, and what I mean by that is let's do an MRI of a hamburger. Let's understand what it is. And it's an assembly of amino acids that form the proteins. They are laced and woven around lipids that form the fats, 70% water, and then some trace minerals and carbohydrates. Well, all of those components exist in the plant kingdom. By definition, they do, because all meat comes from plants. And so let's just leave the animal out of it. Let's instead use science. Let's use cooling and pressure and heat to stitch these fats and proteins together in a way that replicates meat. And here's what's exciting about it is, the cow hasn't evolved for decades. The cow's a stationary target, but at Beyond Meat, every year, every quarter, we continue to improve on the product. So the sausage you had today is better than the sausage we launched. The burger you'll have, or the breakfast sausage patty you'd have at Dunkin' is better than what we started with really 18 months ago. And so we'll get better on taste, we'll get better on nutrition, we'll also get better on cost. So and then the other big step change was that we got grocery chains, first Whole Foods, but then Safeway and then Kroger, to put the product in the meat section of their stores. And then all of a sudden you reach a much bigger audience. If we're only in the freezer, we're at 5% of the population. When we're in the meat section, 95% of the people will encounter this product. And we see so much cross-shopping, and I mentioned Kroger. When we looked at the shopping cart, the Kroger, 93% of the people buying the Beyond Burger at Kroger also have meat in their shopping cart. So we're not necessarily going to double the number of vegetarians in the population, but we're going to increase the number of flexitarians. And then that's more powerful.
Consumption of animal protein.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. So we're going to open it up to questions in just a moment, but I've got one last question. Yeah. You went public recently.
Yes.
Why?
So let's first talk about why it made sense to do Honest Tea the way we did, selling to Coca-Cola. So at Honest Tea, we were growing, but our constraint was distribution. A beverage, you can't ship a beverage company through the internet. You can't. The best way to deliver beverages are on beverage trucks and to get them into these accounts, whether it's into a cooler. And so for us, the key to unlock the democratization of Honest Tea was by working with a partner like Coca-Cola. And that's really happened. At Beyond Meat, we've seen us gain incredible access to customers. The one potential constraint would be access to capital. And so here's a little, just to give you a sense of how these different industries work. So in growing Honest Tea, over the first 10 years, I raised about $10 million, all from angel investors. At Beyond Meat, in our first 10 years, we raised over $100 million, mostly from venture funds. And the reason is because that science I talked about can't be done on the fly. I mean, Honest Tea's R&D was me in a kitchen with some teapots. Beyond Meat has 85 scientists going after every sensory aspect: color, fat, aroma, texture, taste, all of those things. So it needed more capital to grow. And so as we when you do financing rounds, there's a Series A, Series B. We had just done a Series H. And we said, okay, we're at this a while, and we had also held on to people's money for just about 10 years. At Honest Tea, we did our first transaction with Coca-Cola, almost like within a week of our 10-year anniversary. And coincidentally, at Beyond Meat, it was also almost within a week of our 10-year anniversary that we went public. What we looked at was, okay, well, if we need access to capital, one option is to sell to a strategic, but the other is to go our own. And when we looked at it, nobody else was doing what Beyond Meat was doing. So it's true, at Coca-Cola, they didn't have an organic bottled tea, but we were part of a beverage system where that could all work. If what we do and only do at Beyond Meat is focus on creating meat from plants. Other companies have R&D departments, but they're focused on all types of things. And other big food companies may think about, oh, let's make meat from plants, but now let's go work on baby food. And we are only focused on creating meat from plants. And it gives us that singular focus that I think it's such a competitive environment. We're in the largest category in food, so we've got to be incredibly competitive and aggressive. And we are confident that that was the right strategy. And you know, I will say, and I think this crowd can appreciate this, there's a lot of criticism of capitalism these days, and a lot of it is justified. But for me, the IPO experience really did, I don't say renewed my faith in capitalism, because I never totally rejected it, but it made me feel that capitalism can do incredibly powerful and positive things.
Yeah.
And
be pointed in the right direction.
That people can have a dream about an idea. Other people can say, I believe in this idea and I want to support it, or I just want to make money off it, which is, you know, from my point of view, either one's okay. And then it can be brought to scale. Yeah. And there's no other system that I know of that I've seen where it can happen at that level of scale and impact and speed.
Really powerful word. So let's open it up for questions. I see we've got a bunch by Twitter already, but there's one right here in the front. So let's start in person.
Microphone coming.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I have a question about the values when you partner with companies like McDonald's and Coca-Cola. And I understand the democratization of the Honest Tea and of the Beyond Meat, but what about the values? Because the values of those two companies are very different than McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and the other partners.
So it's a great question, and here's what is key. You have to make sure that your product, the values of your product, are both infused into it and non-negotiable. So if I said, oh, Honest Tea, it's healthy, it's natural, socially responsible, well, those words can go anywhere. Instead, we say our calorie level is never going to exceed 50 calories per 8-ounce serving. We're going to use the USDA, which only gets fudged under penalty from the government. Fair Trade Certified is a third-party verified seal. And so we've literally, we talk about mission in a bottle, we've put those into the product. And it's a sealed package, so somebody can't sell Honest Tea without those attributes. I mean, what's been so neat for me over the past few years as we've launched internationally is to go, I'll go into Italy and I haven't met the folks there, but when I go in, it's organic. It's the first time Coke's ever distributed fair trade certified products in Europe, and then it's lower calories. So those things are embedded in it. What's interesting in the restaurant channel for Beyond Meat is we can bring, like Carl's Jr., which is a wonderful partner, we're bringing a plant-based patty, but then they put it on a grill where they've been cooking beef burgers. So that product technically is not vegan. And so then the key, or what you see at Dunkin' is the breakfast sausage patty it's plant-based sausage for sure, but it's served with egg and cheese as an option. You don't have to order that. So then the key is let's be 100% clear about what it is and what it's not. So we tell the partners, don't put vegan on this. Don't say vegan. I mean, some of the restaurants will offer a lettuce wrap as a sandwich, or they'll bring in a vegan bun. But there we just have to make sure we're really clear about what it is and what it's not. And what we found, once again, because we're not selling just to vegans or vegetarians, that consumers are accepting of it. So I think the key then is just to be as transparent as you can be about those things. And whether I think McDonald's is doing a positive thing or not in all the things they do, when I can get an organic kids drink into the McDonald's menu, I know that it's getting millions of new people exposed to organics much earlier than they normally would, and with a lower calorie price point. So for me, that's a net positive impact. And ideally, we help awaken these customers to the benefits, the business benefits, and the other societal benefits of offering healthier, more sustainable products.
Great. What kinds of options are there when you're developing plant-based proteins for continuing to include farmers that depend on meat for their livelihood?
So let's just think about what's happened to the American farmer over the past few decades, right? Basically, a lot of the success of the American economy, and San Jose is sort of one of the ground zero places, has been around technology that has not benefited the American farmer. They've been left out. Commodity, the fact that a lot of the farmers, and I'm talking about people who grow things in the ground, get put into commodity crop situations where the margins are super thin and it's tough to survive. What we hope we will do at Beyond Meat is create a renaissance for the American farmer by letting them grow value-added crops. So I mentioned that we're growing peas as our main feedstock, and this year was the first year we started sourcing from the United States in the Midwest. But peas is only the start. We can also be growing lentils and other forms of crops. So when you think about the supply chain, you want to be higher on the food chain. So if you're growing a crop that's fed to a cow, that's fed to a person, that is at a commodity price. If you're growing a crop that's fed to a person, that's a value-added crop. So we are serious about working with farmers to help them create added value crops that helps give them more income.
Excellent. There was a question right here in the second table.
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm Allison from Disney, and we were having an organic discussion, some of the fellow plant-based eaters and I, about how brilliant Beyond Meat has positioned themselves in the market with something that is an exchange of what a traditional product to a more potentially progressive product, how the word beyond frames it in the consumer's mind. So I'd love to hear from you how that came about, if there's any stories, and how we can steal your great
Thank you. Well, it is really important here. Look, the way to sell something to somebody isn't to make them feel guilty. It's to inspire them to go beyond. Even from a regulatory perspective, the name has really helped us because there are, as you might suspect, folks who are suspicious or protective about the use of the word, and we always want to say this. We have to label really clearly what this is and what it isn't. And beyond is aspirational. It helps take people to think beyond where they are, and whether it's their diet, their environmental impact. And that's the tone we want to set. And that's one reason I love Snoop. There are environmental organizations, there's animal protections organizations that invested in us and love us, and we love them, but those aren't going to be our spokespeople. When we think about performance, one of the biggest impediments in marketing this product is just thinking from the shopper's perspective. It's the parent, often the mom, but not always, who does the shopping. And so as they're in the grocery store and they want to think about, I've got to get dinner, I might want to bring home the plant-based protein, but someone at the table might say, I can't eat that because I need to be healthy, I need to be strong. So we, in addition to folks like Snoop, we have these incredible athletes, whether it's DeAndre Hopkins or Kyrie Irving or Alex Honnold, who eat the product and talk about it a lot. And that helps give some ground cover for the parent who wants to be able to bring home a healthy product, but not sort of face that criticism. There's a new movie that just came out on Netflix called Game Changers. If you haven't seen it, you should. It's amazing because it talks about the world's most powerful athletes, including someone who's literally the strongest man in the world, and he only eats plants. It talks about how the gladiators actually just used to only eat plants. And it's funny, we were talking to Chris Paul. He stopped icing his knees after games after he started eating Beyond Meat because there was less inflammation. So when you can get these types of athletes to talk about this, it becomes aspirational as opposed to the guilt message, which just it's not a good way to sell.
Yeah. We've got one more question all the way in the back.
Thank you. Coming from Planned Parenthood, but also an Algerian family, and I think about the cultural shift that you're making both in North America and then obviously as you talk about where you're sourcing from abroad and the kind of influence you want to have, thinking to 2050 where there's going to be more than a quarter of the population Muslim, across the world. How do you think about the cultural shift when populations like that look at meat as a luxury good, as many also in lower income brackets do too? And as you think about your cultural influencers, how are you trying to reach those more diverse communities?
Really, no, it's a great point. So Absolutely, you know, it is. I mean, the meat. Although we know all these other externalities related to meat, meat as a category has been growing around the world because of rising economic expectations. And our point of view is, what we sell is meat. It's just meat from plants, and so. We want to make first of all, I just parenthetically note, we are now halal certified, so that was one step, and kosher. But we want this product, if we're successful, we want to be in line in consideration with other meat products. And so, you know, the original vision, the one that got me, was when Ethan, our CEO, talked about reinventing the protein case. It's making the meat case the protein case, so it's no longer chicken breast or lamb. Or hamburger, it's chicken protein, lamb protein, and plant protein, all part of the same continuum. And so then it becomes a contest around taste, and we've got to be competitive there. It becomes a contest around nutritional properties or nutritional deficiencies. I mean, you know, our product doesn't have any cholesterol. It has much less saturated fat. We're working on getting the sodium down. And then cost. So, and of course, we can. Right now we make a burger, we make a sausage, but what we did with KFC was a chicken product. We can go after any meat occasion, and then it's just making it in the formulation that the particular culture is appreciated, wants it in, and so we have a wonderful palette to be able to use, and it's just a case of marketing, you know, making and marketing in the culture where we're selling it.
Great. Well, with that, this year's conference is over. So please join me in thanking
Congratulations, everyone.